started here. I thought we'd have more people on, but oh, there's people joining here.
No, you know why nobody came on here? Because they're fear.
They're
got the
scared.
fear. Somebody's going to attach my name to what I said.
And replay it over and over again.
That's why I came.
Yeah, Brandon has the opposite approach. It's like no such thing as bad exposure. So
Totally. Let's do it.
It was the same thing. I didn't get any real tweets off of what I put out. And I put out a pretty, a good amount of opinion there because like, oh, I'm not touching that. Like, I'm not going to, but it's not about the, and I talked yesterday myself and I told him, like, this isn't an Uncle NFL thing.
No,
it's not even close. It's the same thing that I didn't really encounter when I started with the A's, but later on, the last few years, this thing started happening, right? And then, like, man, I immediately, I had the situation where I could go into Billy and everybody else and say, hey, man, this is what's going on. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, well, just whatever you want to do, make sure you cut that. Oh, we don't want that. But these other dudes, they're fear. They got the fear. They're going to get fired for talking about getting fired.
Well, so let's kind of sum up what happened here. And I've heard from different people, and I don't know if I want to mention names because apparently lawyers have told them to not say anything. So, but a player was training away from the team because now I guess a lot of players aren't going to in-person NFL training camps, off-season training camps. So you can, I guess, opt to go and train wherever you want, but there's contract implications there. So my understanding is that as of 1977, you can't go off and ride, side saddle with Ben Roethlisberger without a helmet on a motorcycle or whatever. You can't play basketball with Patrick Mahomes. All these stipulations around, like, we don't want you getting hurt unless it's a NFL team sanctioned practice training session, whatever. So if you're on site, you're covered and your contract won't be negated. But if you do something off site, including training apparently, and you get hurt, there's implications that you might not be paid out with your contract. So it sounds pretty black and white. And now I assume that if Patrick Mahomes decides to go and, go on a dunk contest and blow out his Achilles, the Chiefs aren't going to cancel his contract because he can get surgery and come back. I don't know, if they can not pay him as much. I don't know if there's insurance on the team side that pays for it or if the player is insured, whatever. But it was interesting. I posted about this and George Carvajal said, oh, you have to have good liability insurance if you're training these athletes. And I said, well, how much do you have? Right. And he said 25 million. I said, so I guess you're not working with quarterbacks. Right. And he kind of laughed. So how, I guess the question is, and Rob has a thought around it with a player that he worked with, but is it worth it to work with these players if they're not necessarily allowed to work with you and they get hurt and there's contract implications and they lose tens of millions of dollars? Rob, what are your thoughts initially? And then we'll get to Bob and Brandon.
I mean, first of all, I'm a capitalist, so I'm in business for myself. I am all for anybody being in business. My opinion, and what they say about opinions, is that everybody has a right to be in business. And what the rules and regulations are with regards to the NFL or the NFL Players Association, you can't control that. Those are those entities' own responsibilities and what they dictate. However, we've worked with $100 million players, and Bob, you have, I'm sure others have as well. And I think you have to do a number of things. You have to have liability insurance, but if you have someone that's $100 million player, you're never going to have enough of liability insurance. You just have to stay within your scope of practice and make sure what you're doing is valid, both, is accepted in practice and maybe valid in regards to the scientific literature, because if you're brought to court, you have to validate why you're doing what you're doing, and I just wouldn't take unnecessary risks. And so if you're willing to take those risks, you're pretty good at what you do. Like I said, any coach can get sued for doing anything. My question is this, and Bob, I pose this to you and maybe Brandon, because you guys are at the college level and you guys have been in the pros, so to speak. And here's my question. My question is, and I'm not sure if this can happen or not, And if people think about it this way, so you brought up Patrick,
I gotta be honest with you.
Eric, right? So you heard injured in a private setting. And let's go to the extreme. He can never play again. One is, you know, you're going to be sued with regards to responsibility, the loss of his, because anybody could sue anyone, right or wrong. And do you want to go through that aggravation and expense? One, you have the contract. Two, you have the loss of endorsements over a career. What's that sum of money? And three, can the team sue you even though that contract's insured because you've affected their franchise, the future of their franchise? And so that's a lot to consider. With this gentleman with the Achilles tendon, if we want to go narrow scope, you know, will he sue his private person because if the Broncos don't pay? And this is not an NFL Bronco thing. I agree with Bob. This is a factor of I need to be paid. Who's paying me, right? And can the Broncos say, well, if we don't make the playoffs this year, we're going to hold you liable for lost revenue, playoff money, because we anticipated. Now you have to prove you would have made the playoffs. But again, you know, these are all factors. I don't know if people think of future endorsements. Can the team come back at you? So I'm all for capitalism, but you better look at the playing field and protect yourself against the playing field, because the way lawsuits generally work, and in 40 years I've never been sued. Now watch me get sued on Monday because I said that. But it's not personally, right? I've never been sued. It's not going through the court case. They'll say, well, Bob Aleo suing Rob Panarello for $2 million. And the insurance company will say, if we go to court and we run this thing through court, it's going to cost us $3 million. So let's pay Bob 1.15 and end it. Because it doesn't matter, Rob Panarello, if you're right or wrong. The cheaper way out is just to pay Bob. And that's generally how it works. Not a lot of these things go through the whole legal process. It goes through settlements, you know, which saves the payer money and satisfies the person suing. So, you know, that's my Reader's Digest point of view on this. And again, this is not, I agree with Bob, this is an NFL Denver Bronco thing. This is, to me, if you're in a private sector and you want to work with multi-million-dollar athletes, whether you're a surgeon doing the surgery, whether you're a physical therapist or an athletic trainer or a chiropractor doing the rehab or providing the healthcare, or a strength and conditioning coach training them, everybody has a liability within their scope of practice, and everybody could be in this situation. So, you know.
Yeah, I'll get Brandon. I'll get you to talk next, because you did. If I recall, you did start in private enterprise training athletes, pro athletes, and all that, and then now you've gone through the whole spectrum of university. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think, you know, Rob hit it on the head. One other thing Rob missed, and not intentionally, was that sometimes insurance companies will sue another insurance company because at the end of the day, they're going to go for the deep pockets, right? So like, you know, if I'm going after Bob Alejo right now, I'm not just going to have to name Bob. I'm going to name Bob and the university, because the university has the deep pockets. So Bob will be on there. And because he's an employee, sure, he'd be protected by that, and hopefully under general counsel of the university. So, but, you know, in the private setting, it's interesting because it's a little different, right? Because one thing where we are is that when I started down at Bolletary, now IMG, right, we were sent the athletes through the agent. So now the agent is sending them to us. It wasn't like we're out marketing, right? So now the agent is saying, hey, we're sending them to you. Now, if something goes awry there, then, you know, it's hard to say. The agent can't sue us necessarily because he's suing the company for which he works for, because we're all employed by the same person. So I got a paycheck from IMG. My benefits came from IMG, and we were getting IMG clients. So I wouldn't even know how that would shake out, right? But, you know, I think at the end of the day, that it all makes a great point about, you know, scope of practice. And I used to deal with this a lot at the college setting, is like, if you are a strength coach and you also happen to be an ATC, I didn't hire you to be an ATC. I hired you to be a strength coach. And there's a reason why we have, continuity of care, because if somebody is in the rehab setting, that physician is taking on all the liability. So you need to follow their plan of care. I don't care if you don't agree with it. It's not your job to, right? And you hear people say this all the time, I don't mess up your surgery, don't mess up my training and my rehab, right? And I get that, right? And that's a great, in the world of sound bites in which we live, that's fantastic. But people forget about the liability standpoint. And I said this to a staff member who was also an ATC. And I said, this is how it's going to go down at the end of the day. So-and-so, are you hired in any medical capacity for this university? No. Are you a physician? No. Are you an athletic trainer? Yes. Are you hired as an athletic trainer? No. So do you have any medical oversight whatsoever? No. No further questions, Your Honor. Like, that's how the shit's going to go down, right? And I think people forget about that, is when you play it out in that setting, then things get really real. But the dangerous thing is everybody has their own private facilities. When I started, I was very lucky. There was like 5 people that did combine prep in the country, right? It was like us, Tom Shaw, Mackie Shillstone, Warren Anderson, and like Mike Boyle, right? And like, that was it. And now everybody has it, and everybody has their athlete, and everybody's trying to do that and get more people. And are they qualified? I don't know. Some are, some aren't. And that's where the crap kind of hits the fan. So
That's true. There's, you can do it in your backyard. You can do it in your garage now. You can do
Totally.
it at the beach.
Yep.
So everybody's doing it. And you're right. There's not this oversight. Bob, what are your thoughts?
Wow. I mean, this thing is multi-level at the least, but I will say this: as soon as, and it hasn't happened yet either, and this could be, I know kind of the nuances behind this, and I can't really tell you all about it, but as soon as one of these private places gets a monster lawsuit, and it will be a monster, it will change the face of private facility and sector training forever. And you're going to go ahead and stick your chest out. That's not going to be me. Yeah. Until you're sitting in a chair listening to the questions that Brandon just talked about. Are you certified? I don't need those certified. Are you certified? No other further questions, Your Honor. And, and that'll stop all that chest beating, all that, look at my guy, congratulations on him getting the Heisman or whatever. That's going to change it all. All of a sudden, these guys who think they're way out there aren't going to do it. Unlike the guys that are on here, specifically, I'll just say this because I know exactly what they've done, where they've been. Myself, Rob, and Brandon have been, on a pretty big stage, and we're not doing any of that. We just do our job. And, in the end, you'll either get a ring or you don't, and that's kind of how we do it. But all of a sudden they're going to back away because all that, well, he really wasn't my guy. Well, we seem to have 500 Instagrams of you saying that he was. I think this thing it's this mushroom cloud. But it's going to take one of these lawsuits. And that's why when you put that out there, I said, it's about time this gets addressed, because it's not a secret. Every GM and president and every pro league knows all about it, and they allow it until somebody gets hurt, until you have this injury record. Like I like in the NBA or even baseball now is probably as big as a private kind of training thing as the NBA is. I don't know how any strength and conditioning practitioner or anybody in the performance group could ever get fired for injury rates, because they couldn't be possibly liable for all 52 weeks, because these guys are gone doing their own thing. They're not asked, and part of that, and I said this too in the tweet yesterday, part of this is the culpable party is the strength and conditioning coaches. In other words, how many strength and conditioning coaches or athletic trainers or masseuses, whoever, have gone into the president and GM and said, here's what happens when this goes on before an injury, right? Here's what we do. Here's how we do it. Colleges are the same way. People are making, I can't believe they're not going to pay it. I wouldn't say the overwhelming majority, because I don't know everybody, but my guess is more than not, colleges have these in their sports medicine. You get hurt somewhere else doing something else, we're not going to pay for that ACL. Or if you or to Brendan's point about insurance, some of the insurance policies that these colleges have, they won't pay for it. Even if you wanted to, like, oh no, they're under our care. Like, well, we're not going to pay for that if it's found out that it's not under your direction. I don't know about facility. I think if that's the case in that NFL memo, I think that's bad wording to say offsite, because I mean, look at football again. I don't know what the strength coaches are doing there. Rob even talked about it a few months back about, hey, less of an off season, yeah, less need for a strength coach. Might have to go private facility. Remember we had that conversation, Rob? And then, but like baseball, I need an offsite training facility. Because they're not with me. Baseball is a sport where hardly anybody lives where they play, right? So I need an offsite facility. And while I'm going to write them a program, sometimes they just don't follow it, right? And they go into a place and they see your guy, and all of a sudden that private trainer, whoever wants to connect to that, and he'll throw in an extra, RDL or an extra something or other. And, I want to bring that guy in. I want to say, what are you doing? Here's what you do. Here's how many guys have actually sat down and said, look, here's our protocol. I mean, and I think there's only two ways. Either you don't go anywhere outside to anybody, or because of the off-season thing, the organization embraces the outside practitioner. Bring them in close. Here's what I want you to do, but with a documented documented policies and procedures thing. Here's how you'll work with them. Here's what you'll do. Here's our expectation. What's your expectation? Because in the end, the people on staff who work for those clubs, they're going to be pointed to as the reason why we've got this huge injury, why we're not very good, why all this. And that's, I think that's a conversation that I'll throw out my own opinion. 95% of the strength and conditioning coaches don't have. They just, I don't want to go in there because so-and-so hits 40 homers a year, or that running back has scored 20 touchdowns last year. And I don't know. I think you got to be careful there.
Yeah, because if they do the two extremes, one is they can't leave the facility to do anything physical, right? You have to do it under the care. Or if you go to the other one, like, let's open it up. Do the athletes now have to wear a police body cam so you can monitor every exercise they do? If it goes to court, like, no, he grabbed a kettlebell and it wasn't listed in the workout. Like, I just can't see it going that way. I have no idea how this is going to be resolved. Do you guys have any thoughts on that before we?
Well, I can tell you one other note. I did have that in my second year with the A's. We had a free agent pitcher, well-known pitcher, early on, that injured his shoulder. I can't remember if it was a rotator cuff. I mean, he actually hurt himself. So I'm sitting in the clubhouse, and the athletic trainer at the time, Barry Weiber, came up to me and said, "Hey, just want to let you know we've had an incident. We're getting sued by so and so, and you're on that list." And I just went, "Oh my God, what does that mean? I don't have any money." Like, I had no idea. I mean, listen, when you read about it, it's one thing, but like everybody, and I say everybody, but I know Rob and Brand, when that actually becomes your name across the ticker or in the LA Times or the New York Post, it's a whole different deal, right? And he said, "Don't worry about it. Look, that manual you sent out." And so I had a pictured manual with a training program off season and all. That was an off season injury. And we've got that. And I think we're going to be okay. And I said, "So what was the issue?" He said, "Well, the guy's saying he was working out. He was doing dumbbell incline presses. He was a pitcher. And that's how he hurt his shoulder, felt it there. And then, he's unable to play." And I said, "We don't do dumbbell incline presses." He said, "Exactly. And it's documented." A couple of weeks later, they came back and said, "Well, we went in with a stack like this. He came in with a stack like that." And essentially the guy just said, "Okay, that's enough. You did that. It says here you weren't supposed to. That's on you. Next." So it's exactly what you're saying about, is it a cam or you use the kettlebell? I mean, be prepared, documentation, drive the paper.
Because I even saw some sports talk show where they're saying, they were talking to some ex-NFL players, and they said, "Oh yeah, if we were to get injured, we'd try to like limp into the facility and pretend we got injured there during their session," right? Like, so there's all these possible scenarios, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, three things just to throw out, and one thing is we used to be the physical therapist for an NHL team, and what they did was, and I thought it was pretty unique thought process. They found out every player's personal trainer, where the facilities they were going to at the end of the season, and they flew everybody in for a 2-day meeting going over what they wanted the trainers from their philosophy, this NHL team, what they wanted the trainers to incorporate in the training program of their players, and to hear what the trainers were going to do. And then they flew them back home. So at least they try to initiate some type of camaraderie and communication. So I thought that was pretty good. With Brandon, something you said before, if you have an ATC or a PT who's hired as a strength coach, and the head trainer has a player where they're perplexed in their progression, and they ask the strength coach who has that certification or that license to come in and take a look and assist, since they were asked by the head trainer, are they now off the hook? If something went wrong?
That's a good question. Great question. I have no idea. I would assume that would be, they're asking an opinion. Now, they don't have to take that opinion, right? As you mentioned, what opinions are. You said that earlier, right? But you brought up another point, which is interesting, is that the way we used to do it when we were at Athletes Performance back in the day, and we were adamant that we were going to call every team whose athlete we got, and we would tell them exactly what we were doing. We would send them the program if they wanted to. We would get in touch with their medical staff, send them the program, just so we make sure everybody had full disclosure and understood everything. Now, I know there's a lot of people that don't do that because, like Bob said, people beating their chest, right? You're not going to see my program. I'm not giving you my secrets, right? Okay, right? So there's no proprietary blend of cable chop, right? So I find that kind of funny. But we were very open with everything, just so for this very reason, right? To lower liability, right? It doesn't absolve us, but at the end of the day, it lowers it. And to Bob's point, we see this at the college level. Kid goes out, has a little too much to drink. He's not supposed to be out. He trips in the parking lot. He falls in the parking lot, bruises his ribs. He comes in and says, yeah, I felt something when I was lifting, right? And because he doesn't want to get in trouble. So, and then you find out through the team, through the grapevine there, that, wow, okay, this, actually, Brandon, that's not what happened. He fell in the parking lot. And it's like, oh, okay, right? Because your butt's against the wall because the coach is pissed. And, and so that's part of it too. The other thing I think we forget about, and I'm probably stealing Bob's thunder here because he understands this. There is, in professional sports, there is the business side of house, and there's the on-field performance side of house. And a lot of those decisions sometimes are made by the business side of house, right? Like, well, do we really care? Well, I mean, we got their salaries insured. We have this, we're doing everything according to the union, blah, blah, blah. But, at the end of the day, we really our business practices are X. That's why they're not paying a ton of money on the strength and conditioning side of things, right? And maybe that's created some of this problem, right? They don't pay people very well. You should be honored to be a part of the A's, Bob, right? Everybody wants your job, Bob, right? And, Bob was good, but there's plenty of other people that just aren't, because they don't get paid squat, and they make them, okay, I'm going to give you, $40,000 to be a major league strength coach. And guess what? You need to clean your own bathroom, by the way, right? Because we're not going to have the clubby do it for you. And so as a result, do the team want to be trained by them? Maybe not, right? Maybe they have their guy. And then that goes down to the question, then do teams have their own sanctioned facilities, right? And if they do, then what does that mean if they get hurt, but the team said it's okay to train there, right? So like Bob said, it's deep. Rob even alluded to it too. It's just like, oh, what a tangled web we weave, right? So.
Hey, Brandon, when you guys contacted the teams at Athletes Performance, did they get back to you? Like, what percentage did, and what percentage engaged you?
Pretty good number of them, and we always had an open door policy too, where they could come in, right? And I think a lot of it also was proximity as well, because we had a lot of spring training guys. Bob was right down the road. You just go down and visit him and Greg Houck and Doogie and all those guys, and and they come over. But sure, there's other strength coaches that don't want to call because they're angry. Who are these guys or whatever? I don't really know the reason. That's an assumption on my part, right? But I could see ego getting in the way. Certainly we have that in our profession. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So yeah, we had a pretty good percentage, right? Because I think at the end of the day, we were trying to do good. And, over time, it became much better relationships with everybody because we were calling every year. The Red Sox, you guys you got 6 of our guys here. Here's what we're doing. Okay, great. You want to come down? Come on down. We'll walk you through it, see what we're doing. And the guys appreciated that too, right? The players appreciated that. They're coming in and learning and we're sharing and exchanging ideas, and, they're not sitting in the corner with their arms crossed saying, I could do this better, right? So personalities make a big part of this.
Let me ask this question, Brendan and Bob and anybody else. I know this could be really tedious. You hand out your book and your athletes do the program and they check off, they hand their book back in. Should the strength coaches on staff responsible for the X number of players? So if you think of college football, you could have over 100 players. Should there be a short subjective section after every workout that says perform well, no complaints, versus just sending the book back with the sets and reps checked off, so that if it ever went to court, people would say, hey, on this date at this workout where he said he got hurt or she said she got hurt, they reported no complaints and here it is in writing. I mean, it could get tedious when you have teams with over 100 people, but if you want to protect yourself.
I think the football thing's a little different though, Rob, and I don't, there could be a couple guys in here that are working with football dudes, but football now is year round. I don't, guys aren't, the money's so big now that they can pay for, to make it viable as long as they're in school. So they're putting them in summer session 1 and 2. So that's helpful from an academic standpoint, but well, there's much note taking, although I would say that, just in general, I would say strength and conditioning coaches are the worst businessmen ever. They don't talk about money, which is, I was guilty of it. You're uncomfortable talking about money. You're uncomfortable about going to the AD if you ever get a chance to sit in that office. I mean, it's a bad spot, and that all harkens back to the beginning where, I kept talking about the position I'm in now, and that should be out there. That way you have an AD and they actually know what you do, who has the ear of the boss. So those things can get taken care of. But that business acumen, Rob, comes along with what many like you do, is keep copious notes, and documentation. Like I use our workout sheets. I mean, they look like a scribble pad by the end of each cycle, because I don't, oftentimes you're just running around. You don't have time to have this, let's just summarize that day, like, nah, I'm putting it down there, notes next to the deadlift, the high pull, the tricep, whatever it is, and I think those are very important, driving the paper. Sandy Alderson taught me that. And as you know, when you go into court, you got to have as much stuff there as you can possibly have it. It can't be in, and I would say oftentimes in our area, our profession, those kind of notes aren't as copious as they should be. Some of those things you're talking about, just some of these informal discussions, right? Those are informative.
Is it become a players league where, okay, we don't want to piss off the player and we want to let his guy come into the facility, and we could talk about the Patriots example, but is it at that point where they're making so much money and they have so much bearing on the outcome of a season or a playoff that whatever, just go, that's why they're not addressing this, because they don't want to piss off the athletes? You guys have thoughts on that? Anybody have thoughts?
Well, I know one NFL team that the training staff and the strength and conditioning staff had a very big concern with that, because if an outside entity came into the facility and a player was injured, they're still liable because it happened at that facility. And so they went to the legal, department of that team, explained the situation. Legal agreed with them, and that particular team prohibits, for that reason, outside professionals from coming in and the player's guy training or a player's guy rehabbing them. Because just because someone gets hurt, everybody gets sued, right? If you have surgery and it goes wrong, the surgeon gets sued, the anesthesiologist gets sued, the nurse on call gets sued, the PA on the floor gets sued, the hospital gets sued. It's all these layers, and then as you go through the process, people get eliminated from responsibility based on their contribution or non-contribution to the detriment of the patient. Well, it'll be the same thing here. If you bring someone in from the outside, because it occurred at the team facility, there's a good chance that they would be sued for liability. And then you'd have to go through the process to determine who's involved, who's not involved. And so, the legal representation of this one team said, we don't want to go through that. If we're going to get sued, we're going to get sued by our team physician because of negligence. If it occurred, our team physicians and our staff and et cetera, not an outside entity being present in our facility.
We used to have in NCAA, there used to be a rule that you couldn't have any outside entity come in and work with the team unless it was a sports psychologist. And I think that rule has since changed. But I used to use that rule all the time because, strength conditioning tends to be understaffed, woefully understaffed. And as a result, coaches get angry because their needs are not being met, rightfully so. And so I used to have to pull that out many times saying, we need more people. And they're like, well, they want to bring their own person. I'm like, well, you can't. Right. So what I need you to do instead of bringing this person, which you can't do, is you go up to the administration and start barking a little more. That way there's two of us barking about getting an extra staff person, right? Because that's part of the issue too. Now, I think I'm not familiar because I left NCAA in 2014, right? But I think I've heard through the grapevine that rule may have changed, which is unfortunate, right?
Yeah, because and listening to everybody talk here, like this is, if I was in a private facility business working with pro sports, the fear would be paralyzing after hearing you guys talk about this. And is that not, can you leverage that to make sure that one, there's better compliance and better care and people following standards? Rob? No,
like I said, I'm all for it. I'm all for capitalism. Yeah. I'm all for someone being in their own business, whether you're a physician, a physical therapist, a chiropractor, whatever it may be, a strength and conditioning coach, a personal trainer. Just, you have to, look at the playing field and be prepared and protect yourself as best as possible. Going back to what we were just talking about, my biggest hesitancy for bringing an outside entity into a team organization is because the outside entity can't give you 100%. Like if you're an employee, if you're part of the organization, you show up there, you work there, you give your all. 100% of your day is for that team entity. If you own a private business like us, when we were the team physical therapists for that NHL team, I didn't know the business to run. I was not 100% dedicated to that NHL team. We got the patients that we worked together with their training staff, whether they're on the road, needed care, continued care, or whatever it may be. But I couldn't give you 100% to that NHL team. And then the other thing is, my concern is, when you bring an outside business, well, two other things. When you bring an outside entity into a professional sport team or whatever, they're also training people that are playing against you and trying to beat you, right? So what do I want that? I want someone 100% dedicated to getting my players better so I could beat everybody else. And then if we wind up getting fired because we're unsuccessful, well, that outside private business entity still has their business to fall back on, right? And so again, they have to keep that business going. And if they have a business to keep going, they cannot give you 100%. So that's my concern. If I was a GM or an owner, for bringing outside entities in with regards to my team. I need people who are going to give me 100% that are going to live and die by this team, because our livelihoods and our success is dependent upon that, regardless of the legal ramifications that we just spoke about as well. So that's my personal hesitancy to bring in an outside entity into it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think this is a great conversation, and honestly, every pro team and private facility should listen to this, and you could start a little consulting business, Brandon. Um, I want to open it up. Ryan Banta, do you have problems with people coming into your high school, strength coaches, medical professionals, trying to barge in on your business there?
It's kind of it's a different scenario. The situation that I'm in, I always think of this when we're discussing this conversation in general, is that quote from Kennedy, which is, success has 1,000 fathers and failure is an orphan. I oftentimes think of that quote when we deal with this situation. I've been blessed to not have a lot of athletes get injured under my charge until this year. And that's been very interesting, which was kind of predicted that we were going to have a few problems than we normally do because of the lack of just general physical fitness, being able to interact with the athletes, all this kind of stuff. But for me, 3 hamstring pulls in 10 years up until this year. And all 3 were young ladies that were a little bit overweight, to put it kindly, had a real strong Q angle, and had teeny tiny feet. But the last one of those 3, the mom basically wanted my job. She wanted me fired. She wanted me removed from the position. She threw out things saying that I was racist and all this kind of stuff. And my school district was ready to basically, they said to me, one of the officials in my school district said, well, we might have to fall this on the sword with mom here. I go, I'm not falling on any sword. If you expect me to fall on a sword, then I'm not going to meet with mom without a lawyer. And I said, plan on everything being recorded of what you're saying in the meeting. And if it's not recorded, then I'm not going to have the meeting, and the reality is that this person was very, very unfit. They injured themselves the day before doing twerking on the ground and hit the splits on picture day. Okay, picture day is the least favorite day for all coaches, and she's there, on Instagram, bouncing it and pulls her hamstring, and it's on video. And one of the athletes on my team said, you may want this just in case, because this particular mother is a person who is all about, suing everybody and everything for anything. And it was a really bad deal. Recently, one of my most talented kids had a hamstring pull with another track and field club against my wishes, training in the off season against my wishes. But as a high school coach, I don't have a lot of power to tell them where and when and what they can do. The thing that frustrates me the most is when things happen outside of your control, the 22 hours that you don't see the athlete, and you end up getting the blame for it. One of the things when I interviewed Al Vermeil for my podcast recently, he talked about a story about Rob Gronkowski. The NFL team wanted him to do all these different types of lifts and workouts, and then videotape himself like you were talking about, like police cam. And literally all he did is go back into the changing room, put on different clothes, and then did the other lifts to prove that he was doing the lifts. So he did everything on one day and just changed his outfit 5 or 6 times, and then split it up like, hey, I didn't film all my sets and reps, but here's me going through all of my workout, and I mean, crazy stuff like that athletes are willing to do or deny. And then on the flip side, I got an email from an athlete 2 days ago telling me what events she was going to run at the state championship and what events she wasn't going to run, and how she doesn't want to sacrifice this or that because she's afraid she's going to get hurt. And I said, well, if you're afraid you're going to get hurt, then you cannot run. And I said, I don't know if you know this or not. I'm the one who decides what events you're in. So this is not going to happen. Either you do everything I ask you to do, and here's why, and here's our plan to make sure you feel happy and comfortable and healthy before you compete, But this stuff, what I'm getting at is this stuff is now funneling all the way down to high school athletics. And it's a real problem. And as coaches, we have to start thinking about these things to be prepared to be protected, to lawyer up when and where we need to, but also we need to be a little bit more intentional about making sure our athletes are communicating things that are going on or that are not going on. And I think that Rob brought up a great point talking about filling out some sort of form, a Google sheet. How did you feel the workout was today? Are there any things that are sore on you? Where are they located on the body that seem to be hurt? What is your plan to deal with those sorenesses or injuries? Are you going to talk to the trainer? And we have forms like that filled out for athletes to do in my program to try to mitigate those things, because if you didn't communicate it, I can see what you can't see as the athlete, but as the coach, I can't feel what you are feeling.
Wow, that's complicated.
Yes.
I thought it was just pro sports, but you're right. It's trickling its way down. Brian Miller, at the academy level, do you have some of these issues with some of the cadets that you work with?
Midshipmen, not cadets.
Oh, sorry.
But we have such a different population that many of these issues don't really apply to our specific setting. But a question that I want to present to the group, just because I don't know, is with these insurance and liability issues with these professional teams, is this a possible reason why some of these professional teams don't bring on more interns? Because they don't want to have the interns training these athletes, and they are not full-time employees with the professional team, and that creating a whole snowball effect of more insurance issues. So that's a question I'm putting out there to everyone here on the call.
I mean, I would say, I don't know, because I'm not at a professional level. I would say you are liable for anything that happens occur under the scope of your facility. If you don't shovel snow out front the facility and someone slips and falls and breaks their leg, you're going to get sued. If you're right, you can get sued. Let me say that, right? So in all scopes that go under the roof of your facility, you're going to be named, whether it was an outside entity under the four walls of your facility, or whether it was your staff or interns or anything else. You can be liable if an unfortunate event occurs. And that's why I use this simple example of, somebody slipping and falling, right? I mean, they fracture themselves, they're on your property, you can get sued, right? As a homeowner, you can, as a business entity, you can. So, you have insurance for that, but you can get sued. So yes, interns, anything that happens under that roof, you can be liable for.
I think with the intern piece, one of the things that is problematic is they don't want to pay interns. And I think that's what a lot of it is. And this is kind of a separate issue, but the U.S. Department of Labor has the Fair Labor Standards Act or something along those lines, right? And you can look it up, and it's this thing that courts use to determine who is the beneficiary of the intern's work. To determine, it's like 7 questions that you have to answer, and then if you answer yes to any of those, or I don't know, a certain amount of those, then you need to pay them. Otherwise, it was colleges don't want to pay it. Private sector people don't want to pay it. At Athletes Performance, that we were talking, I was talking to a colleague of mine just a month ago. He's like, yeah, I used to work at Exos, and we had this thing where like we didn't pay interns, and I have no idea why we didn't pay interns. It was something to do with like college credit. I'm like, well, I can tell you why, because I wrote that. And what it was is that if they were getting college credit, you didn't have to pay them. But if they weren't receiving college credit, then according to the U.S. Department of Labor, you had to pay them. Now these things have been updated for a while, but I think that's really more of the issue. I don't know if it's really a liability issue. I think it's more of a, do I want them as an employee type of issue.
Wow. Geez, we got to get a lawyer on board here. What? Okay, so I'm going to get it back into Brandon's lap here. So, as a consultant, and you're brought in, what advice would you give to teams on how to handle a lot of these things, about who they have their players work with? Are there any guidelines that you could provide to a pro team right now that you think would help the situation?
I've never been asked the question, but teams have a very good general counsel, right? And they look through everything and vet everything, and they're going to do everything for the best interest of that organization. I can tell you from a private sector standpoint, and working in the private sector, is that, and I'll use somebody who's, just I guess, don't do stupid stuff when you train people, right? That's the thing. Like, I look at Eric Cressy, for instance, and you go in and watch his training, he gets great results. Why does he get great results? Well, he has good methodology. It's sound. It's backed by evidence, but he doesn't let the guys get away with anything when it comes to how they perform an exercise. It is, everybody is identical. There is no give and there is no take. This is the way it needs to be done. And because he does it and educates them and they understand why, he gets great results. Right? He's not trying to do some crazy stuff where, okay, a physio ball on a BOSU ball with one leg, using a body blade and doing external rotation, right? You're not doing anything crazy like that just so you can get likes on Instagram, right? I mentioned earlier, we live in a world of sound bites. We live in a world of like video bites too. And everybody's trying to get their name out there. Everybody wants to be Mike Boyle by Friday. Everybody wants to be Bob Alejo by Friday or Rob Panarello by Friday. They don't want to put the work in. They just want that instantaneous fame. And as a result, they do a lot of crazy and frankly stupid stuff, right? And even pro teams do it, right? Remember, what was the NBA team? The guy was doing a dumbbell bench press on a physio ball and the physio ball broke. Remember that? And the guy fractured his arm. And it was in the New York Times. This is a number of years ago, but it's that type of stuff where you just use your head, right? Don't do a kettlebell swing facing everybody in the room. So if your grip fails, all of a sudden you have this, 16 kilogram cannonball flying across your weight room floor, right? Put people against the wall, do it toward the wall. So if something bad happens, it's going to be, you minimize it, right? We train athletes to stack the odds in their favor of having a successful performance. So what we need to do as business people and working in the private sector is stack the odds in our favor of not letting something bad happen. You can't prevent everything, but if you can show that you did the right steps according to handbooks, according to OSHA, according to the NSCA, according to whomever, then you're decreasing the likelihood that something's going to be bad or you're going to be held severely accountable or whatnot, right? Those are the things.
Yeah, Bob, is it possible to be you by Friday?
Sometimes it's impossible for me to be me on Friday. It's tough being me. I make it look easy, but it's no fun, and don't try it at home. I would say
disclaimer, see, you're minimizing liability.
Yeah, right. And and I won't take credit for anything I just said. Well, first of all, back to the intern thing that who was it that Brian asked? I don't have anybody work with athletes who aren't certified. So that's, to Brandon's point, all this, BS about pay the interns and that, but yeah, I mean, people just think money falls out of the air. I mean, if you ever sat in a meeting like I have, like Brandon has, like Rob has, and looked at the bottom line, it's uneducated to suggest like, well, just pay those guys. Just pay them. Yeah, give me a new sweatsuit while you're at it. It's the stupidest thing. We have what's called adjunct faculty here, which I love the name. Adjunct faculty, because everything comes under that heading here on campus. We're a mid-major. We are still under kind of campus guidelines and rules. We're not separate like at the Power 5 or you're self-contained. Adjunct faculty, performance assistants, they're all certified. When I was back at State, I just felt like, just for the fact that at the time, the CSCS, and I think there's a couple of others that come on board now, was the only kind of litigation-ready certification at the time. And just, I mean, look, you guys make certifications if you want. If you have gross negligence, it don't matter. But if it's best practices, those, has the minimum requirement for knowledge and implementation, then you're going to be fine. It's just, because there's already an implied risk. I've talked to counsel about that, just in terms of just, people coming in and having a waiver. He said, the waiver is, they're going to sue you anyway. But in terms of winning and losing, that's the case, right? And so if the track team from another city comes in and wants to use your weight room on Wednesday, and they're going to compete on campus on Friday to sign a waiver, there's already an implied risk that you're going to weight train, and that is a risky event. Not everybody, comes out of it healthy. So anyway, I just jumped right above it and said, interns, you're going to watch, you're going to learn, you're not going to touch a bar, a kid, or nothing. So that's how I get away with that, Brian. I don't know about the money issue. I've never had that be a problem in terms of, they don't want to, or that somebody said, no, we don't want somebody working with our athletes. The more exposure you get, the higher your risk is. So that's not been our case. I just think you have to document. I mean, you have to have, again, strength coaches aren't really good businessmen. I was certainly one of them years and years ago, afraid to talk about money, afraid to gather salaries. And, I mean, it's shameful really amongst all of us. Our first professional baseball strength conditioning coaches association meeting, when there was about 20 of us, myself, Fernando Montez, and Steve Odgers, who's now with, who's he with now? The agent.
Boris,
yeah, that's right, Brandon. We started, but when we wanted to kind of help the profession, this is kind of a side, this is connected a little bit. Hey, look, we get information about salaries, but that's all it is. In other words, when the league reports somebody making 50,000, that might be a salary, but it may not be his income. His income might be 75 because he gets 10 here and 5 there and a computer and a phone and all that's important, right? So let's say I'm saying 20. Just write on a piece of paper. Well, my organization doesn't want to talk to me about my salary. Doesn't want me to talk about the salary. To which my response was, of course they don't. They don't want you to know how little you make compared to everybody else. So, okay, fair enough. Rip off a piece of paper, just rip it off and write it on there. Out of 20, everybody hand their stuff in. Yeah, we all handed it in. We had 15 papers. Okay, what is the other 5 guys? Well, I'm not gonna do that. Okay, well, this is for the good of everybody, right? And so it's another uncomfortable conversation going into the president and GM and say, this is what's happening here, good or bad. We all need to be ready. It's kind of like my job now when we say, hey, coach, we're not doing that, or athletic training, how about this, or strength and conditioning. I'm protecting us. I'm all of us, the university, in this case, the university, the athletic department, the practitioner, and the kid. I'm protecting that. So let's make sure we're in line here, because as we're going to see here coming up, there's going to be some money involved. Now the stakes are much different now than they were in '93 when I got into baseball. I mean, these salaries have now blossomed, and frankly, there's a lot of money being paid to some strength coaches now too. And so that's another issue. And so now we've just hit COVID, as many of you with your own business have now found. Money wasn't falling out of the sky. Now you got to change a little bit of your, I would guess, business plan, right? To say, okay, how do we do this without compromising our healthcare? Because you'll get sued for that too, one of those deals. So I just say, have that conversation with the president, the GM, or the AD, and say, this is what we need to do. And in some instances, it's probably, as I said, it's not, I'm not all against outside practitioners. There's some good things there. Like in the case of football having less time with them, baseball having this off season, that we're going to need an offsite. And I would welcome a practitioner with this kind of policy and procedure that goes along with that. Has to be had, man.
Mike Hurst, when you listen to these conversations, is this peculiar to North America? Is there anything in your part of the world where you're like, okay, this applies to me? Do you have some of the same issues working with athletes and bringing in different people to help you out?
I was saying I've never been sued, and I've never been threatened with being sued in my work a track coach, as a strength and conditioning coach, whatever. But it's always on my mind, and this conversation this morning has been absolutely terrifying, and it'd be enough to knock me out of the game and many more like me, independent individual providers, service providers. The litigation in Australia is nowhere near what it has been historically in the USA, which is a far more litigious society, I think. But it's coming. Without a doubt, it's coming our way, because we're always 10 or 20 years behind what happens in North America. Yeah, but it's been an interesting topic. I thought it was going to be a bit dry, but it's been really interesting and very sobering.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we're discussing this, because I think, again, like Bob said, these conversations aren't being had, and until they are, it's just going to keep building and building and building. And like you said, Bob, there's going to be a huge lawsuit. It's going to decimate how we do things. And I hope it doesn't get to that point. Any thoughts on that, Bob?
I mean, I don't want to violate the trust of Lauren, but Lauren's prepared. The organization's prepared, which is, I think, we're certainly not as cute as that little girl, but we have a lot of smart folks on this call that I think two things, like, again, you got to have these conversations. At the same time, if any of us, if I stepped out on the baseball field and then I said, oh my God, I'm working with this $20 million player and this Hall of Famer, and then all of a sudden I started getting nervous about being nervous, and then I'm going to make a mistake. I've never ever thought about that. But I think if you do start thinking about that, being fearful, you're going to make some mistakes. At the same time, if you're good, if you best practices, if you know what you're doing and you're smart, and you've got I'm closing in on 40 years in the business. I got a pretty good sample size that I can look at and say, okay, I think I've done okay. Let's go forward here. That doesn't mean you just throw caution to the wind, but I think we're going to see it. I think this is going to be a big deal, because, the NFLPA came back with a pretty strong statement saying that the NFL, you sent it to me, it's a gutless response. What they didn't say was that they didn't know about the fact that offsite was in the CBA. Somebody's getting fired. That's if it comes down to it, and that, what we all see is, face value, and there's a crap load of stuff underneath there. But the NFL claims it's in the CBA. The NFLPA didn't mention any of that in their thing. Oh, yeah, they just want to control every aspect of your life and all that. And the player has been doing what's been instructed by the coach. Okay, we're going to find out. And then somebody's going to have to pay out something they don't want to, or somebody's not going to receive money they think they need to get. And that's not going to go away. Not at that level.
Yeah. Yeah. Sam Feldman, you're the youngest person on this call. Are you crapping your pants right now?
Not quite.
Okay.
Definitely a little bit of a different take on the conversation than I expected to happen. I think it's a lot to take in, actually, and realize with what Bob and Rob have really said a lot today. So it's definitely gone a different direction than I first expected. I know from the perspective of being in professional as it is, if we have guys going somewhere, we try and know who they're with and whatnot. And even just myself, like looking at social media these days with how big it's gotten. I think Bob's alluded to this. Like I remember listening to a podcast back February, I want to say, maybe. And a prominent off-season trainer is pumping his chest that guys don't get injured when they're with him. At the same time, that should be the case when it's the off season, right? Like, you're not playing your sport. That's the time when you're more likely to get injured. So, like, what are we pumping our chest about here a little bit more than anything too? It's very interesting. Guys shouldn't get hurt in the off season. guys hopefully don't get hurt when they're with us in general, but it can always happen. It's very interesting though, I think more so to see the chest pounding and who it's from. And then when they go quiet, when quote unquote, their guy gets injured. And just especially having the knowledge of who is it who has gotten injured, having the idea in the back of your mind, how many people have gotten injured, even if they're not with you in the time during the season. Is that someone who you want to allow your athlete to go see necessarily when you can't see them? I think Bob's been in baseball too, and knowing the amount of guys you have in the organization and where they're all from, you're not going to be able to have them all throughout the offseason, no matter what, from top to bottom. Guys go home to countries in Central America, and you're not going to be able to have them. Hopefully you can have them following a plan, but even then, do they all even have, the requisite equipment to come back being prepared for what is or isn't accessible where they are? So there's a lot to it too, beyond just the big numbers, where as a young guy here, hopefully I'm not crapping my pants thinking about all that, has been mentioned.
All right, we'll wrap it up here, but I'm going to get the big three here to comment. But is Instagram our body cam? Is it allowing us to see what's actually going on? And is there a liability to posting all of this stuff? Like, this is what we're doing. No injuries. We're doing this fancy new exercise. Brandon, what are your thoughts on the social media component to all of this? Should teams be recording everything that this trainer is doing with their athlete just in case?
I think you can tell a lot about a trainer by what they post. I've actually not hired people who've applied for jobs because I've looked at their social media. I didn't like the way they coach. Doesn't mean they're bad coach, just means it doesn't fit my style, right? But I think you have to be careful, right? It's a fine line between the bravado and trying to market your business, which I get you have to do, and maybe telegraphing some information that doesn't need to be telegraphed, right? And there's also the discretion of athletes. Like everybody that we've always worked with, whether it was in the private sector or even, with my own consulting, I don't say anything. Maybe that's just the Italian in me, right? Three can keep a secret if two are dead, right? Is what I was brought up hearing, right? So it's like, you just don't go around saying, this is my guy. This is, all right, Bobby Leo crushed it today. That's my guy, right? It's like, I'm pretty sure I just didn't screw them up, right? And I think that's kind of the thing. But I get people have to market, right? But I think there are probably classier ways of doing it. And there's nothing like word of mouth. I still think today, even with social media and all the crap out there, knowing that I got this guy, he's excellent at what he does. I know you ask 10 other people, they'll tell you the same thing. I think that goes a long way.
Bob, your thoughts on that?
And this my whole point, these days it seems is about the practitioner. I think that's what you have to be careful of, and make sure that you're having those conversations. Look, the private sector thing's not going away. Not every private sector coach is doing something out of Barnum and Bailey to try to produce, better 40-yard dashes. But be prepared, do your due diligence, and whatever it is, I think it's got to be a huge conversation, so that it's just not you out there talking about, as I work for the ball club, we need to do my program. No, your program is wins. How do we get the most wins? And you got to be a little flexible without compromising what we know to be true in the science. That's totally possible. And if you have the right front office, that should be easily taken care of. And again, I'm not playing just one side. On the other side, if the front office really likes some of these outside guys that's working with these people, I say, well, then why do you have the strength coach? Bring that guy in. If that guy's not good enough, why keep him there? I think this conversation does have layers, but at some point you got to protect yourself because times are changing.
Yes. Rob, as a private business owner.
Yeah, well, from a team perspective, what you said before, just to jump on that for 2 seconds, I just think if you're going to bring in a consultant, bring in someone that really knows what you're looking for, run a SWOT or a needs analysis, bring in the best people that you think can work under the same culture and take direction from the head of the department, and pay them. If I want Ryan Banter to come and work with my team, what's it worth for him to leave his job at the high school? You have to pay these people, all right? And because someone who's certainly qualified and probably one of the better people in their field aren't going to come for $50,000 a year. Pay them. You got a payroll of hundreds of millions of dollars, right? You don't bring your Ferrari to, no offense, people work for Volkswagen, a Volkswagen mechanic or whatever, right? So pay them. Put together this team of professionals and pay them. All right. So that's on the pro end. And I'm not against adjunct people. My point is, like, Texas doesn't have an adjunct offensive line coach, right? But maybe you have an adjunct hand therapist for your team, for your players that have hand injuries. You may not employ a full-time hand therapist because maybe those injuries are few and far between. So I'm not against that. I'm talking about key positions outside, bringing in outside people. I just think you have to be 100% dedicated to the organization. And I think if you're worried about an outside business, you can't be 100% dedicated. I'm in that situation, as I explained before. As far as the private setting, I'm all for it. I'm a capitalist. I want people to do well in business. This is America. You should do that. But just know the playing field. Be prepared of what can happen to you by being in that setting, and protect yourself. As Brandon said, maybe it's what Eric Cressy does. Everybody practices the same way so that we know that what we do is valid and justified, and limits our legal exposure as well as gives us performance enhancement results. If all your staff has to go through, and you may laugh at this, but if all your staff has to review a sexual harassment video because one of your personal trainers or one of your strength coaches sexually harassed a female client, well, you went through that educational process. You made your people aware of what's right and wrong, and thus that decreases the liability of you as a business entity, right? Because you at least covered your bases there. So know the things that you have to do with regards to limiting your legal exposure and protecting yourself. But by no means am I trying to discourage anybody from going into private business. So, that's my viewpoint on team sport. That's my viewpoint in regards to a private business in the limited time we have.
Yeah, well, great conversation. I think Rob, Brandon, and Ryan can write a book called How I Built My Business Around My Italian Heritage. You'd probably do well. So thanks for jumping on, everybody. This is enlightening, very enlightening. And I think more people need to talk about these scenarios and these issues, because I don't think it's being had right now, and it's bubbling over right now. So thanks for jumping on, and hopefully you get everybody back soon again, and we'll have a more positive topic to talk about.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks, Derek.
Take care.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Good to see you all.
Yep.
Likewise.
I guess.